Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to our read aloud of Can You Forgive Her by Anthony Trollope. We are up to chapter 3, which is titled John Gray, the Worthy Man, in reference to the man who our heroine, Alice Vavasor, is affianced to be married. And she has recently sent him a letter informing him of her plans to go to the continent with two of her first cousins, a man and a woman. And her childhood caretaker, Lady MacLeod, thinks the arrangement is terrible, totally unsuitable, because in the Victorian era, young women married their first cousins, and she has already been romantically affianced to her first cousin, George. So this arrangement, of course, won't suit her present husband-to-be. Lady MacLeod is sure that John Gray will write back and object. But we didn't see the letter, and now we do. Mr. Gray's answer to Alice Vavasor's letter, which was duly sent by return of post and duly received on the morning after Lady MacLeod's visit, may perhaps be taken as giving a sample of his worthiness. It was dated from Nethercoats, a small country house in Cambridgeshire which belonged to him, and at which he already spent much of his time, and at which he intended to live altogether after his marriage. So he's a small enough means so that he does not intend to have a house in town, just the country. And this is dated from Nethercoats, June of 1860-something or other. Dearest Alice, I am glad you have settled your affairs, foreign affairs, I mean, to so much to your mind. As to your home affairs, they are not, to my thinking, quite satisfactorily arranged. But as I am a party interested in the latter, my opinion may perhaps have an undue bias. Touching the tour, I quite agree with you that you and Kate would have been very uncomfortable alone. It's a very fine theory that of women being able to get along without men as well as with them. But like other fine theories, it will be found very troublesome by those who first put it into practice. Gloved hands, petticoats, feminine softness, and the general homage paid to beauty all stand in the way of success. These things may perhaps someday be got rid of, and possibly with advantage, but while young ladies are still encumbered with them, a male companion will always be found to be a comfort. To which, from this exact same time period, I want to say just two words. Mary Kingsley, whose male bearers were too afraid to go where she went in her petticoats. Anyway, I don't quite know whether your cousin George is the best possible knight you might have chosen. I should consider myself to be infinitely preferable, had my going been upon the cards. Were you in danger of meeting Paynim forces, he, no doubt, would kill them off much quicker than I could do, and would be much more serviceable in liberating you from the dungeons of oppressors, or even from stray tigers in the Swiss forest. But I doubt his being punctual with the luggage. He will want you or Kate to keep the accounts, if there are any. He will be slow in getting you glasses of water at the railway stations, and will always keep you waiting at breakfast. John Gray is kidding here, but all these predictions are right. Notice the thing that he's sure that George Vavasor will be able to do is violence. Little foreshadowing. We're going to meet George soon, but we're still getting foreshadowings that he is a wild, violent man. I hold that a man with two ladies on a tour should be an absolute slave to them, or they will not fully enjoy themselves. He should simply be an upper servant, with the privilege of sitting at the same table with his mistresses. I have my doubts as to whether your cousin is fit for the place, but as to myself, it is just the thing I was made for. Luckily, however, neither you nor Kate are without wills of your own, and perhaps you may be able to reduce Mr. Vavasor to obedience. I think that this is quaint Victorian falderall. I think Trollope is meant for us to think of it that way. I myself have only ever adopted that attitude, that I must be the complete servant to a traveling companion, when the traveling companion was old. When they were old. So their spirit still loved traveling. They were still great for conversation. They were infirm getting off a train, infirm going up strange stairs. Maybe wanted someone to get their food and bring it to the table. When the few occasions where my traveling companions were old, where they were getting frail, then yes. Otherwise, no. Otherwise, you're on your own. As to the home affairs, I have very little to say here. In this letter, I shall, of course, run up and see you before you start, and shall probably stay a week in town. I know I ought not to do so, as it will be a week of idleness, and yet a week of happiness. I'd sooner have an hour with you in the country than a whole day in London. So it's not just that he has slender means; he doesn't like London. And I always feel in town that I've too much to do to allow of my doing anything. If it were sheer idleness, I could enjoy it, but it is a feverish idleness, in which one is driven here and there, expecting some gratification which not only never comes, which never even begins to come. So back in the 1860s, Trollope is describing this. This is his description of life in London. That's a pretty good description. What did it say? A feverish idleness. That's a pretty good description of living in a gigantic city. That description fits New York City to a T. I will, however, undergo a week of it, say the last 7 days of this month, and shall trust you to recompense me by as much of yourself as your doings in town will permit. And now, again, as to those home affairs. So notice, he has passed completely over the point that Lady Macleod thought would be the sticking thing. He doesn't have any objection to George Vavasor other than he thinks George Vavasor will be a little bit of a boring companion. Someone who'll need more help than he gives. Other than that, he's moved on to domestic arrangements, and the domestic arrangement is that she still hasn't set a date. If I say nothing now, I believe you will understand why I refrain. You have cunningly left me to imply from what you say that all my arguments have been of no avail, but you do not answer them, or even tell me if that you have decided. I shall therefore imply nothing, and still trust to my personal eloquence for success, or rather not trust, but hope. Here we have a rare instance of Trollope betraying his bumpkin upbringing, because the word he wants here is infer, not imply. The garden is going on very well. We are rather short of water, and therefore not quite as bright as I had hoped, but we are preparing with untiring industry for future brightness. Your commands have been obeyed in all things, and Morrison always says, the mistress didn't mean this, or the mistress did intend that, or God bless the mistress is how, John Gray, the mistress here, Morrison is the groundskeeper, and the mistress here is her. She has been to Nethercoats. God bless the mistress is what I now say, and send her home, to her own home, to her flowers, and her fruit, and her house, and her husband, as soon as may be, with no more of these delays, which are so to me so grievous, and which seem to me so unnecessary. That is my prayer. Yours ever and always, John Gray. And Alice Vavasor is reading this letter on her chair. We have one of the ugly illustrations in this edition. She's reading the letter on her chair, and she's receiving it with gaiety and good grace and humility at being loved by such a worthy... no, she's not. She's receiving it like a snot. Oh, sorry, don't mean to prejudice the audience. I didn't give commands, Alice said to herself as she sat with the letter at her solitary breakfast table. He asked me how I liked the things, and of course I was obliged to say. I was obliged to seem to care, even if I didn't. Such were her first thoughts as she put the letter back into its envelope after reading it the second time. Then she opened it, which she did quickly, not pausing a moment lest she should suspect herself of fearing to see that which might be its contents. Her mind was full of that rebuke which her aunt had anticipated, and which she almost taught herself to expect. She had torn the letter open rapidly, and had dashed at its contents with quick eyes. In half a moment she had seen what the nature of the reply was respecting the proposed companion to her tour, and then she had completed the reading slowly enough. No, I gave no commands, she repeated to herself, as though she might thereby absolve herself from blame in reference to some possible future accusations, which might perhaps be brought against her under certain circumstances which she was contemplating. Very roundabout language. Very roundabout. But what does that mean? That she doesn't want to be accused of having given commands if she backs out of the whole arrangement. Then she considered the letter bit by bit, taking it backwards and sipping her tea every now and then amidst her thoughts. No, she had no home, no house there. She had no husband, not as yet. He spoke of their engagement as though it were a betrothal, as betrothals used to be of yore, as though they were already in some sort married. Such betrothals were not made nowadays. There still remained, both to him and to her, a certain liberty of extricating themselves from this engagement. Should he come to her and say he found that their contemplated marriage would not make him happy, would she not release him without a word of reproach? Would not she regard him as much more honorable in doing so than in adhering to a marriage which was distasteful to him? And if she would so judge him and certainly acquit him, was it not reasonable that she under the similar circumstances should expect a similar acquittal? Then she declared to herself that she carried on this argument within her own breast simply as an argument, induced to do so by the assertion on his part that he was already her husband, that his house was even now her home. She had no intention of using that power which was still hers. She had no wish to go back from her pledged word. Sure sounds like she does. She thought that she had no such wish. She loved him much and admired him even more than she loved him. Uh-oh. Always trouble in Trollopsburg. He was noble, generous, clever, good, so good as to be almost perfect. Nay, for aught she knew, he was perfect. Would that he had some faults. Would that he had. Would that he had. Always notice when Trollope repeats things. How could she, full of faults as she knew herself to be, how could she hope to make happy a man as perfect as he was? But then there would be no doubt as to her present duty. She loved him, and that was everything. Having told him that she loved him, and having on that score accepted his love, nothing but a change in her heart towards him could justify her in seeking to break the bond which bound them together. She did love him, and she loved him only. But once she had loved her cousin. Yet, truly it was so. In her thoughts she did not now deny it. She had loved him, and was tormented by a feeling that she had had a more full delight in that love than in this love that had sprung up subsequently. George Vavasor has plenty of faults, but he's her first cousin, and in any sane society that would be inbreeding. She had told herself that this had come of her youth, that love at 20 was sweeter than it could be afterwards. There had been something of rapture in that earlier dream which could never be repeated, which could never live indeed except in a dream. Now she was older and perhaps wiser. Love meant a partnership in which each partner would be honest to the other, in which each would wish and strive for the other's welfare, so that thus their joint welfare might be ensured. Then, in those early girlish days, it had meant a total abnegation of self. The one was of earth, and therefore possible. The other had been a ray from heaven, and impossible, except in a dream. And she had been mistaken in her first love. She admitted that frankly. He whom she had worshipped had been an idol of clay, and she knew that it was well for her to have abandoned that idolatry. He had not only been untrue to her, but, worse than that, had been false in excusing his untruth. He had not only promised falsely, but had made such promises with a deliberate, premeditated falsehood. And he had been selfish, coldly selfish, weighing the value of his own low lusts against that of her holy love. She had known, we're going to get a lot more of low lusts and holy love, don't you worry. Right now, low lusts and holy love might seem to you a little bit on the dull side. And it's not going to help any when we meet John Gray in just a minute. But believe me, there are low lusts and holy loves coming that are much more dramatic. She had known this, and had parted from him with an oath to herself that no promised contrition on his part should ever bring them together again. But she had pardoned him as a man, though never as a lover, and had bade him welcome again as a cousin and as her friend's brother. She had again become very anxious as to his career, not hiding her regard, but professing that anxiety aloud. I want you to keep in mind, every time the word cousin is mentioned, first cousin. First cousin. She knew him to be clever, ambitious, bold, and she believed even yet, in spite of her own experience, that he might not be bad at heart. Now she told herself that in truth she loved the man whom her troth was plighted. I fear she almost thought more of the other man for whom she had torn herself asunder, and with whom she's going on a long holiday in Europe. Why should he find himself unhappy in London, she said, thinking of John Gray, as she went back to the letter. Why should he pretend to condemn the very place which most men find the fittest for all their energies? Were I a man, no earthly consideration should induce me to live elsewhere. It is odd how we differ in all things, however brilliant might be his own light, that he would be contented to hide it under a bushel. Yeah, if you were a man, you wouldn't want to live anywhere else, but you know perfectly well that when you marry this man, you're going to live in Cambridgeshire and see London once a year. And at last she recurred to that matter to which she had been so anxious when she first opened her lover's letter. It will be remembered that how assured she had expressed herself that Mr. Gray would not condescend to object to her traveling with her cousin. He had not so condescended. He had written on the matter with a pleasant joke, like a gentleman he was, disdaining to allude to the past passage in her life of her whom he loved, abstaining even from expressing anything that might have been taken as permission on his part. There had been in Alice's words, as she told him of their proposed plan, something that had betrayed a tremor in her thoughts. She had studiously striven so to frame her phrases that her tale might be told as any simple statement, as though there had been no trembling in her mind as she wrote. But she had failed, and she knew she had failed. She had failed, and he had read all her efforts and all her failures. So when she was writing to him, she was trying to make the trip seem like nothing, rather than wary that it was something or even seem to be asking permission. She very much did not want to be seeming like she was asking permission. She tried hard to write it that way, and she failed. John Gray saw right through it. She was quite conscious of this. She felt it thoroughly, and she knew that he was a noble and a gentleman to the last drop of his blood. And yet there was almost a feeling of disappointment in that he had not written such a letter as Lady Macleod had anticipated. And you know that's what Trollope was leading up to. That a part of Alice Vavasor was hoping that John Gray would object. During the next week, Lady Macleod still came almost daily to Queen Anne Street, but nothing further was said between her and Miss Vavasor as to the Swiss tour, nor were any questions asked about Mr. Gray's opinion on the subject. The old lady, of course, discovered that there was no quarrel, or, as she believed, any probability of a quarrel, and with that she was obliged to be contented. Nor did she again on this occasion attempt to take Alice to Lady Midlothian's. Indeed, their usual subjects of conversation were almost abandoned, and Lady Macleod's visits, though they were as constant as heretofore, were not so long. She did not dare to talk about Mr. Gray, and because she did not so dare, was determined to regard herself in a degree ill-used. So she was silent, reserved, and fretful. At length came the last day of her London season, and her last visit to her niece. I would come because it's my last day, said Lady Macleod, but really I'm so hurried and have so many things to do that I hardly know how I manage it. It's very kind, said Alice, giving her aunt an affectionate squeeze of the hand. I'm keeping the cab, so I can stay just 25 minutes. I've marked the time accurately, but I know the man will swear it's over half an hour. So what can we assume from this? Doesn't have a footnote in this Oxford edition. You Victorian specialists, what can we assume from this? From this context, I am reading that in Victorian times, a cab would wait for you at your location for up to half an hour without charging you anything extra, or leaving. Since Lady Macleod mentions that the man is going to tell her that it's over 30 minutes, I'm assuming it's charging extra. So is that true? Cabbies in Victorian London were expected just to wait, and that you got 30 minutes free? You'll have no more trouble about cabs, Aunt, once you're back in Cheltenham. The flies are worse, my dear. And by fly, she doesn't mean the insect, she means the conveyance. I really think they're worse. I pay the bill every month, but there was always one down that I didn't have. It's the regular practice, for I've had them from all the men in the place. It's hard enough to find honest men anywhere, I suppose, said Alice. Or honest women, either. What do you think of Mrs. Green wanting to charge me for an extra week because she says I didn't give her notice till Tuesday morning? I won't pay her, and she must stop my things if she dares. However, it's the last time. I shall never come up to London again, my dear. Doesn't Lady Macleod sound like pleasant company? Aunt, don't say that. But I do say it, my dear. What should an old woman like me do, trailing up to town every year merely because it's what people choose to call the season? To see your friends, of course. Age doesn't matter when a person's health is as good as yours. If you knew what I suffer from lumbago. Though I must say coming to London always does cure that for a time. But as for my friends, well, I suppose one has no right to complain when one gets to be as old as I am. But I declare I believe that those I loved best would sooner be without me than with me. Take it from me, Lady Macleod, if that's true, it's your fault. You don't mean me, do you, Aunt? Oh, no, my dear, I don't mean you. Of course, my life would have been very different if you had consented to remain with me till you married. But I didn't mean you. I don't mean that I meant anyone. You shouldn't mind what an old woman like me says. You're a little melancholy because you're going away. No, indeed. I don't know why I stayed the last week. I did say to Lady Midlothian that I thought I should go on the 20th, and though I know that she meant that I really didn't go, that she knew that I really didn't go, she had not said one cent to me since. To be sure, they've been out every night, but I thought she might have asked me to come for lunch. It's so very lonely dining by myself in lodgings in London. And yet you will never come and dine with me. No, my dear, no, but we won't talk about that. I've just one word more to say. Let me see. I've just 6 minutes to stay. I've made up my mind that I'll never be coming up again, except for one thing. Why won't she come to dine with Alice in Queen Anne Street? Is it because of Alice's father? But he's never there. What's that? And what's that, Aunt? Alice said, as she asked the question she well knew what the one thing was. I'll come for your marriage, my dear. I do hope you will not keep me waiting long. Ah, I can't make any promise. There's no knowing when that might be. And why should there be no knowing? I always think that when a girl is once engaged, the sooner she's married, the better. There may be reasons for delay on the gentleman's part. There very often are, you know. But, Alice, you don't mean to say that Mr. Grey is putting it off? Alice was silent for a moment, during which Lady Macleod's face assumed a look of almost tragic horror. Was there something wrong on Mr. Grey's side of which she was altogether unaware? Alice, though for a second or two she had been guilty of slightly playful deceit, was too honest to allow the impression to remain. No, Aunt, she said, Mr. Grey is not putting it off. It has been left to me to fix the time. And why don't you fix it? It's such a serious thing. After all, it's not more than 4 months since I accepted him. I don't know that there has been any delay. But you might fix the time now, if he wishes it. Well, perhaps I shall. Some day, my aunt. I'm going to think about it, and you mustn't drive me. But you should have some people. You should have someone to advise you, Alice. Ah, but that's just it. People always do seem to think it's so terrible that a girl should have her own way in anything. She mustn't like it, and she mustn't like anyone at first, and then when she does like someone, she must hurry him directly she's bidden. I haven't much of my own way at present, but you see, when I'm married, I shan't have it at all. You can't wonder that I shouldn't be in a hurry. You don't have much of your own way. You're independent in London. You have your own means. You never see your father. No one ever directs you to do anything. I'm not advocating anything like hurry, my dear, said Lady Macleod. But goodness gracious me, I've been here 28 minutes, and that horrid man will impose on me. Goodbye. God bless you. Mind you right. And Lady Macleod hurried out of the room, more intent at the present moment upon saving her sixpence than she was on any other matter whatsoever. And then John Grey came up to town, arriving a day or two after the time that he had fixed. It is not, perhaps, improbable that Alice had used some diplomatic skill in preventing a meeting between Lady Macleod and her lover. They both were very anxious to obtain the same object, and Alice was to some extent opposed to their views. Had Lady Macleod and John Grey put their forces together, she might have found herself unable to resist their joint endeavors. If you want to resist, maybe you don't love the man. She was resolved that she would not at any rate name a day for her marriage before her return from Switzerland. And she may therefore have thought it wise to keep Mr. Grey in the country till after Lady Macleod had gone, even though she thereby cut down the time of his sojourn in London to 4 days. On the occasion of that visit, Mr. Vavasor did a very memorable thing. He dined at home, with the view of welcoming his future son-in-law. He dined at home and asked, or rather assented to Alice asking, George and Kate Vavasor to join the dinner party. Good Lord, there's never been such a gathering at Queen Anne Street. What an auspicious omen for the future nuptials, said Kate, with her little sarcastic smile. Uncle John dies at home, and Mr. Grey joins in the dissipation of a dinner party. We shall all be changed soon, I suppose, and George will take to keeping a little cottage in the country. Kate, said Alice angrily, I think you are the most unjust person I ever met. I would forgive your raillery, however painful it might be, if it were only fair. And to whom is it unfair on the present occasion? To your father? It was not intended for him. To yourself? I care nothing as to myself, you know that very well. Then it must be unfair to Mr. Grey. Yes, it was Mr. Grey whom you meant to attack. If I can forgive him for not caring for society, surely you might do so. Exactly. And that's just what you can't do, my dear. You don't forgive him. If you did, you might be quite sure that I should say nothing. And if you choose to bid me to hold my tongue, I will say nothing. But when you tell me all your thoughts about this thing, you can hardly expect but what I should let you know what mine in return. I'm not particular, and if you are ready for a little good, wholesome, useful hypocrisy, I won't balk you. I mayn't be quite so dishonest as you call me, but I'm not so wedded to the truth that I can, but what I can look and act and speak a few falsehoods if you wish it. Only let us understand each other. You know I wish no falsehood, Kate. I know it's very hard to understand what you do wish. I know that for the last year or two I've been trying to find out your wishes, and upon my word my success has been very indifferent. I suppose you wish to marry Mr. Grey, but I'm by no means certain. I suppose the last thing on earth you'd wish to do is marry George. The very last. You're right at that, at any rate. Alice! You dish it out, but you can't quite take it now, can you? This Kate's reaction to hearing the slightest criticism of her brother George is the first note we have of something that's going to strike a lot more notes as the book goes on. So you should prepare. You will have your Alice annoyometer, but I'm afraid it's not just the first cousin marriages that's slightly incestuous. So the incestometer should also be ready. Alice, sometimes you drive me too hard. You do indeed. You make me doubt whether I hate or love you most. Knowing what my feelings are about George, I cannot understand how you could try to bring yourself to speak of him with me in such contempt. Kate Vavasor, as she spoke these words, left the room with a quick step and hurried up to her own chamber. There Alice found her in tears, and was driven by her friend's real grief into an expression of an apology which she knew was not properly due from her. Kate was acquainted with all the circumstances of their old affair between brother and Alice. She had given in her adhesion to the propriety of what Alice had done. She had allowed that her brother George's behavior had been such as to make any engagement between them impossible. The fault, therefore, had been hers in making any reference to the question of such a marriage. Nor had it been by any means her fault of the same kind. Till Alice had become engaged to Mr. Grey, she had spoken of George only as her brother, or as her friend's cousin, and now she was constantly making allusions to those past occurrences, which of all of them she should have striven to forget. Under these circumstances, was not Lady Macleod right in saying that George Vavasor should not have been accepted as a companion for the Swiss tour? The narrator here is correct. These emotions are not dead. The little dinner party went off very quietly, and if no other grounds existed for charging Mr. Grey with London dissipation than what was afforded, he was accused most unjustly. The two young men had never met each other, and Vavasor had gone to his uncle's house prepared not only to dislike but to despise his successor in Alice's favor. But in this he was either disappointed or gratified, as the case may be. "He has plenty to say for himself," he said to Kate on his way home. "Oh yes, he can talk. And he doesn't talk like a prig either, which was what I had expected. He's uncommonly handsome." "I thought men never saw that in each other." "I never see it in any man." "I see it in every animal," said George. "In men, women, horses, dogs, even pigs. I like to look on handsome things. I think people always do who are ugly themselves." First notice that we've had of what George looks like. "And so you're going into raptures in favor of John Grey?" "No, I'm not. I've seldom go into raptures about anything, but he talks in a way I like a man to talk. How he bowled my uncle over about those actors, and yet if my uncle knows about anything, it is about the stage 20 years ago." There was nothing more said than that about John Grey. But Kate understood her brother well enough to be aware that this praise meant very little. George Vavasor spoke sometimes from his heart, and did so more frequently to his sister than to anyone else, but his words generally came from his head. On the day after the little dinner party in Queen Anne Street, John Grey came to say good-bye to his betrothed. For his betrothed she certainly was, in spite of those very poor arguments which she had been used to try to convince herself that she was still free if she was to claim her freedom. So our narrator weighs in. Nonsense about this, the way things are done nowadays. Our narrator believes they are betrothed. Though he had been constantly with Alice during the last 3 days, he had not hitherto said anything as to the day of their marriage. He had been constantly with her alone, sitting for hours in that ugly green dining room, and he had never touched the subject. He had told her much of Switzerland, which she had never yet seen, but which he knew well. He had told her much of his garden and house, whither she had once gone with her father, whilst paying a nominal visit to the colleges of Cambridge. And he had talked of various matters bearing no immediate way into his own affairs, for Mr. Grey was a man who knew well how to make words pleasant. But previous to this last moment he had said nothing on the subject which was his intent. "Well, Alice," he said, when at last the hour came, "and about that question of home affairs?" "Let us finish our foreign affairs first." "We've finished them, haven't we?" "Oh, no, we haven't started, but we've had that discussion. Is there any reason why you'd rather not have this thing settled?" No special reason." "Then why not let it be fixed? Do you fear coming to me as my wife?" "No." "I cannot think that you repent your goodness to me." "No, I don't repent it. When you call what you call my goodness, I love you entirely, too much for that." "My darling." And how he passed his arm round her waist and stood near the empty fireplace. "And if you love me, I do love you. Then why should you not wish to come to me?" "I do wish it. I think I wish it." "But Alice, you must have wished it altogether when you consented to be my wife." A person may wish for a thing altogether and yet not wish for it instantly. Instantly, said John Gray. Come, I have not been hard on you. This is still June. Will you say the middle of September, and we shall still have time for the warm, pleasant days among the lakes? Is that asking too much? It is not asking for anything, said Alice. Nay, but it is, love. Grant it, and I will swear to you that you have granted me everything. She was silent, having things to say, but not knowing in what words to put them. Now that he was with her, she could not say the things which she had told herself that she would utter to him. She could not bring herself to hint to him that his views of life were so unlike her own that there could be no chance of happiness between them unless they could strive to learn somewhat, lean towards each other somewhat. No man could be more gracious in word and manner than John Gray, no man chivalrous in his carriage toward a woman. But he always spoke and acted as though there could be no question that his manner of life was to be adopted, without a word or thought of doubting by his wife. We haven't seen much of him, but that is what's bothering Alice, among other things, is that his completely complacent assumption is that his way of life will be completely adopted by his wife. She will live at Nethercoats year-round. She will concern herself with the farm and the garden. When the two came together, why should not each yield something and each claim something? This she had meant to say to him on this day, but now that he was with her, she could not say it. John, she said at last, do not press me about this till I return. But then you will say the time is short. It would be short. I cannot answer you now. Indeed, I cannot. That is, I cannot answer in the affirmative. It is such a solemn thing. Will it ever be less solemn, dearest? Never, I hope. He did not press her further then, but kissed her and bade her farewell. So that's the end of the chapter, and also of the drag race outside, and now of a commercial interruption. In the middle of a Sunday afternoon, I have been sitting on this fainting couch, typing and reading, since 6:30 in the morning. There has been no noise at all of any kind. Now we've had boom boxes, drag racing, sirens, and fire engines, all in the course of reading one chapter of Trollope. But anyway, that is our chapter. So we have met George Vavasor, we have met Kate Vavasor, and we have met John Gray. Fairly a large amount of heavy lifting here. We've met a lot of our cast, although not all. Plenty of people still to be introduced. So we're going to move on from there. I'm going to quit while I'm ahead with the background noise, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.